My name is Emily Carter, and on the surface, I've perfected the art of composure. If you saw me tonight at the family dinner table, silk blouse pressed, hair pinned neatly, wine glass resting lightly in my hand, you'd think I was every bit the calm, agreeable daughter my parents always wanted. But when my father cleared his throat and casually announced, "We've decided your sister will move into your apartment next month," the glass nearly slipped from my fingers. My apartment. The words were dropped so effortlessly, as if my life, my choices, my independence were just items on a family chore list to be reassigned. Everyone kept eating. My mother passed the potatoes. My sister smiled like she'd won a prize. And me? I swallowed hard, tasting bitterness beneath the sweetness of the red wine. Inside, my chest tightened, not just from the audacity of it, but from the memories it dragged back. Years of being overlooked, underestimated, treated like I was incapable of standing on my own. I pressed my lips together, choosing silence instead of protest. On the outside, I was poised. On the inside, a storm cracked wide open. If they believed my apartment was theirs to give away, maybe it was because I'd let them think I was still the girl who had nothing. Still dependent. Still small. But that night, I decided I'd let the truth reveal itself in a way they'd never forget. I wasn't always this composed woman sipping wine in a silk blouse. Years ago, I was just a scared 20-year-old with shaking hands and a heart that broke a little more each time my family dismissed me. I can still see that night as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I was sitting at the kitchen table of our old house in Ohio, my notebook open, nervously telling my parents about the design program I'd been accepted into. It was small, nothing prestigious, but it was mine. I wanted their support. My father barely looked up from his paper. "Emily, that's not a real career. Why waste time on things that don't pay?" My mother chimed in, voice flat. "Your sister is going to law school. That's what we're proud of. Maybe you should think about something more stable." The lump in my throat swelled. My hands trembled so badly, I had to grip the edge of the notebook to steady them. I forced a smile, pretending their words didn't sting, but deep down it felt like someone had punched a hole straight through me. That was the night I packed a small suitcase and left. No dramatic shouting match, no grand goodbye, just me slipping out the door while the house slept, a single duffel bag on my shoulder and my heart pounding like a war drum. The apartment I moved into wasn't glamorous. Peeling paint, creaky floors, a bathroom sink that groaned every time I turned the faucet. But it was mine. Mine in a way nothing else had ever been. Before I left, my grandmother pressed something into my hand, a delicate silver locket she'd worn since her 20s. Inside was a photo of her as a young woman, smiling, full of life. "Whenever you feel small, Emmy," she whispered, "remember you come from women who refuse to stay small." Her words burned into me. I clutched that locket through sleepless nights, through job rejections, through moments where my stomach growled and my eyes stung from tears I didn't want anyone to see. That apartment, the one they now claimed like it was theirs to give, was the birthplace of my independence. And I swore I'd never let them take that away. The first weeks in that tiny apartment were brutal. I worked double shifts at a cafe down the street, my fingers raw from scrubbing counters and my feet aching in cheap sneakers that had lost their cushioning. Rent swallowed most of my paycheck, and some nights dinner was nothing more than instant noodles. But every time I reached for my grandmother's locket, I reminded myself, this was freedom. Hard, messy, unglamorous freedom, but mine. During quiet mornings, before heading to the cafe, I would sit cross-legged on the floor with my old sketch pad. I designed furniture, logos, even dream homes. It was my escape, but also my determination written in pencil lines and ink smudges. One day, a customer at the cafe noticed me sketching on a break. She was older, elegant, with a presence that made people step out of her way. Her name was Margaret Lewis, a well-known interior designer in the city. "You've got an eye," she said, flipping through my pages. My cheeks burned, but she didn't laugh. She hired me as an assistant on the spot. Working for Margaret was like being thrown into deep water without knowing how to swim. She demanded perfection, long hours, and creative courage I didn't always feel I had. But she also believed in me, something my own family never did. She'd lean over my shoulder, pointing at my sketches, and say, "Don't hide your instincts, Emily. They're sharper than you think." With her mentorship, I learned the industry inside out. I hustled through endless nights, balancing Margaret's projects with small freelance gigs. My first real client was a boutique cafe owner who needed a logo. I charged barely enough to cover groceries, but when I saw that logo shining on their storefront, it felt like I had planted my flag in the world. From there, small wins stacked like bricks. A website design that paid my rent on time. A local magazine spread that featured one of my interiors. The first deposit I made into a savings account labeled Future. But I kept my success quiet. On family calls, I stuck to vague updates. "I'm keeping busy. Work's fine. No, I don't need anything." It was easier to let them believe I was scraping by. I wasn't ready to hand them the satisfaction of knowing I had proven them wrong. Behind the scenes, though, my life was transforming. I upgraded from ramen to home-cooked meals. I traded the squeaky futon for a real bed. And that apartment, the one with peeling paint, became a sanctuary filled with my own work. Shelves I built, a desk I restored, walls decorated with art I could finally afford. Margaret eventually nudged me to branch out on my own. Scary didn't even begin to describe it, but I did. Slowly, clients came. Then bigger ones. And then, almost without realizing it, I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. The apartment that everyone thought was too small for a future? It had become the launchpad of an empire I built with my own 2 hands. The night of that family dinner still burned in my mind as I unlocked my apartment door a week later, preparing for what I knew was coming. My parents had been clear. My sister, Jessica, would stop by to take measurements for her new place. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply let the silence sit, the same way I had learned to survive in their house years ago. Only this time, silence was not surrender, it was strategy. When the knock came, it wasn't Jessica standing there. It was all of them. My parents, my sister, even my aunt, who had a habit of keeping family gossip alive like oxygen. They filed into the building, whispering among themselves, expecting what? A cramped, shabby apartment with mismatched furniture? A struggling daughter they could pity and overwrite? What they found instead stopped them cold. The apartment had transformed. Hardwood floors gleamed under warm, recessed lighting. Original art, pieces I had invested in, hung tastefully along the walls. My bookshelves overflowed with design journals and travel volumes. A sleek glass desk stood by the window, overlooking the city skyline, with my laptop still glowing from the last project I had submitted to a client in London. Jessica's eyes darted everywhere, wide and incredulous. My mother's hand froze mid-gesture, clutching her purse like it might save her from drowning. My father cleared his throat, but no words came. I watched their reflections in the polished mirror above the mantel. Letting the silence stretch, thick and heavy, was delicious. For once, they had to absorb me as I was, not as they imagined me to be. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calm, steady, not raised. "You wanted to assign my apartment like it was some family heirloom. But this apartment isn't just 4 walls. It's mine. Every inch of it was earned, paid for by work you never believed I was capable of." Jessica laughed nervously. "Emily, come on, did you rent it furnished or?" "No," I turned to face her, letting her see the steel in my eyes. "Every piece you see, I chose. I designed. I paid for. And it didn't come from scraping by at some cafe job. It came from building my own design firm." The words landed like a thunderclap. My father's eyebrows shot up. "Design firm? You? That's impossible. You. Impossible." I smiled thinly. "Funny. That's exactly what you told me years ago when I wanted to study design. And yet here we are." I walked to the glass desk, pulling open a folder, and slid it across the surface toward them. Inside were contracts, invoices, bank statements, proof of my work, my clients, my financial independence. My mother picked up a page, her hands trembling. The numbers made her lips part in disbelief. You own this company?" she whispered. "I built it," I corrected. "From scratch. With no help from you. With nothing but long nights, rejection, and faith in myself. While you were busy praising Jessica's path, I was carving my own." Jessica's cheeks flushed crimson. "So what, you're rich now? That doesn't mean—" "It means," I cut her off, "that I'm not the weak, dependent sister you can take from. It means this space, this life, isn't yours to claim." For the first time in my life, the room was silent in awe of me. Not of Jessica. Not of anyone else. Just me. And it was in that silence I realized I didn't just own this apartment. I owned the power in the room. I let the silence linger, because for once, I wanted them to sit in the weight of it. My whole life, they had been the voices drowning me out, telling me who I was, what I couldn't be, what I didn't deserve. Now, the only voice in that apartment was mine. "I know what you expected," I said finally, my tone even. "You thought you'd find me struggling. Easy to dismiss. Easy to push aside, like always. And if that had been true, you'd have handed over this apartment without hesitation. But things are different now." Jessica shifted uncomfortably on the leather sofa she hadn't dared sit on until now. "Emily, we didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." I met her eyes, unflinching. "And that's the problem. You've all been so comfortable assuming I had nothing worth protecting. That ends tonight." My father crossed his arms, defensive. "So, what are you saying? You won't help your own sister?" I inhaled slowly, letting the words settle before I answered. "I will help, but not by handing over what I've built. If Jessica wants her own apartment, she can work for it. Just like I did. My condition is simple. She stops waiting for handouts and starts chasing her own dreams. No shortcuts. No comparisons. Just her." Jessica's mouth fell open, but I didn't pause. I turned to my parents. "And as for you, if you want to be part of my life, you'll start treating me as an equal. No more backhanded comments about my career. No more measuring my worth against anyone else's. Respect me or stay on the sidelines. Those are my terms." My mother blinked rapidly, her lips pressed tight, as if swallowing words she didn't know how to form. My father's jaw worked, stubborn as ever, but I could see the crack in his armor. He wasn't used to me holding the line. "And one more thing," I added, softer but sharper. "Family doesn't get to take what I've bled for. Not anymore. If you want to be close to me, you come as supporters, not as owners." The air was thick, my words hanging like heavy velvet curtains across the room. For once, they couldn't cut me down with a dismissive remark. They couldn't roll their eyes and laugh me off. I had stripped away their power without raising my voice, simply by standing in mine. Jessica looked away first, fidgeting with her purse strap. My mother smoothed her skirt, as if order on the outside might restore order within. My father stared at me long and hard, but behind the steel in his gaze, there was something else. Something I had never seen before. Respect. I leaned back against the desk, calm, composed, every inch the woman they had refused to believe I could be. "These are my conditions. Take them or don't. Either way, I'll be fine." For a long moment, no one spoke. My words seemed to hang in the air like smoke, impossible to wave away. Then Jessica finally broke the silence. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I don't know what I even want, Em. Maybe I've just been living off what Mom and Dad expected of me." It was the first honest thing she'd said in years. I didn't smile, but I nodded. "Then figure it out, Jess. On your own terms. You're capable of more than shortcuts." My mother's eyes shimmered, tears threatening. She reached for my hand, tentative, as if afraid I'd pull away. We were wrong, Emily. We should have believed in you. I should have believed in you." I let her hold my hand, but this time the power wasn't in her grip, it was in mine. Belief is a choice you can still make. But it starts with respecting me. Not just tonight, not just when it's convenient. Always. My father gave a stiff nod. The man who had dismissed my dreams with a flick of his newspaper finally lowered his pride. You've built something real. I see that now. I didn't need his approval, not anymore, but hearing it was like closing a book I'd carried too long. That night, after they left, I stood alone in the apartment. The city lights spilled across the hardwood floors, and I reached for the locket around my neck. My grandmother's words whispered back to me as if carried on the hum of the night. Remember, you come from women who refuse to stay small. I smiled through a sting of tears. She had been right all along. The girl who once shook at the kitchen table, too afraid to raise her voice, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had built her own life, on her own terms, and finally claimed her place in it. As I set the locket back against my chest, I whispered into the quiet room, more for myself than anyone else. They tried to assign away my apartment, but they'll never again mistake who it belongs to or who I've become.